Hello students, in this session we will discuss about the object database standards, the languages and object-oriented database design. In the previous session we were discussing about the various object-oriented database features that includes various type constructors, objects and associated things. So that situation we were focusing on only the basics. In general only we were discussing about the representation of database in terms of object-oriented concept. So in this session here we will be discussing about the database standards, the various object-oriented database standards. Like as you know, in relational database we are having the standards like the SQL standards. Similarly, we are having some standards used for object-oriented databases also. Similarly, in the case of for object-oriented we are having some other standards. Similarly, we will also look into the different languages that are used for processing the database present in object-oriented systems. So we need to use some languages like SQL, DDL language and DML language in relational database system. Here we are using similar types of languages exclusively for accessing to the object-oriented databases. And also we will see how we will design the database by using these standards and languages. So in the first session we will discuss about the object model of ODMG. So we will be discussing about ODMG, which is actually Object Database Management Group. It is a group that consists of an object model which focuses on the object-oriented database concepts. So the object-oriented database design, the creation of the definition, like a relation table creation. Here the ODMG will be following some standards, and according to these standards the different languages followed by this ODMG will be using those syntaxes for creation of the database and access to the different object-oriented database contents. So ODMG is a standard that is used for representing various objects and the access to the different objects and values or data present in an object-oriented database. It can be compared with the SQL standard that is used for a relational database system. So this ODMG model provides a standard model for the object database system. So the model supports the definition language, which is commonly called as ODL, object definition language, which is similar to data definition language in relational database system. So here we will be focusing on the creation of object-oriented database or creation of definition of object-oriented databases. Then the ODMG model supports another type of language which is called as OQL, that is object querying language, which is used to do some manipulation or access to the data present in the object-oriented database system. So ODL and OQL are two languages, general languages used for the creation as well as manipulation of the data present in the object-oriented database system, and these two are presented, or that is part of the ODMG model. Now this ODMG model supports a variety of data types. So several types of data can be included within this model, and it also supports the type constructors. These are actually the main requirements for an object-oriented database system that we have already seen in our previous session. Now first of all we will discuss about ODMG objects and literals. So as you know, these two terms are important in the case of object-oriented database system. So as you know, it is object oriented system. We need to focus on the entities like objects. So objects are the main elements of an object oriented database, and similarly the literals are the values associated with the different elements or different portions of an object oriented or object that is present in an object oriented database system. So these two can be considered as, the objects and literals can be considered as the basic building blocks of an object model that is present in ODMG. Now when we consider these objects, this object actually consists of 4 different characteristics. So every object should have the following 4 characteristics. First one is the object identifier. So every object that are created in the object oriented system must have a unique system wide identifier. So this identifier will be assigned by the system automatically, and every object will be having its own unique name. So no 2 objects can have the same name. So every object will be having a unique name that will be automatically assigned by the internal system. So this is one of the major characteristic of object that is present in object oriented database system. Similar to the identifier, so identifier is a very important requirement for an object. Similarly, for an object we can have a name that is a unique name within a particular database or a program, but this object name is an optional part. We can have object name, but it is not always required to have an object name for all the objects, but identifier is always required, that will be generated automatically. Now the third point to an object is the lifetime of an object. So that is another main characteristic, how long an object will be remaining within the system. So there can be 2 types of objects. One is a persistent object and second one is a transient object. Persistent object, we had a small discussion in the previous session. Persistent object means if you make one object as persistent, this object will be permanently retained there within the system. So at any time that object will be permanently stored within the database system. Even after the switching off of the system, the object will be remaining there within the database system. But in the case of transient, it can be similar to an object that is created in a C++ program. That is, when we create an object while executing a program, that object will be created, but the object will be removed from the memory later after the usage of or just after when we are exiting from that particular program. So we are not permanently storing the object that is already being created in the case of transient object, but persistent object will always remain there for the future reference or for access to the object in the future also. That is another important characteristic of object. Then the fourth one is the object structure. The object structure specifies how an object is being constructed or which type constructor is being utilized for a particular object. What type? We have seen some general types like we are having atom structure, we are having tuple structure, we are having list structure, we are having set structure, we are having bag structure, etc. So all these are different forms of type constructors. So the structure portion will decide how the object will be constructed, by using which type constructor the object will be constructed. That will be decided by the structure of the object. So here it will also decide whether an object is an atomic object or a complex object. Atomic object means the object will be having a single value or single portion only, just like a single name will be there for a particular object. But if it is complex structure means it will be having a type construct like tuple and all that consists of more than one type or more than one attributes and its corresponding values. Then it can be called as a complex structure. So based on which type constructor the object is being created, that will decide the structure of a particular object. So the 4 points related to, or 4 characteristics related to an object are: first one is object identifier, that is a mandatory field, a unique system defined identifier. Then the second one is a name to an object, which can be provided, but it can be an optional part also. Similarly, the third portion is the lifetime, that decides whether an object is retaining within the system permanently or it is a transient one. So this can be decided while creating an object. The user can make an object persistent, or the user can leave that by removing the object just after the usage of that particular object. And the fourth characteristic, that decides the structure by forming the structure using any of the type constructor, whether it is an atomic object or it is a complex object. Now the second portion is ODMG literals. So we have seen the characteristics of objects, and now we are discussing about ODMG literals. So what is actually a literal? A literal is having the current value for each structure portion. What is the current value present associated with that particular object? That can be considered as a literal. That is for example, name. If I am providing the name, for example, Raju is the name of a person, name of a student. So the current value of that student is Raju. So a literal always holds the current value for a particular object. So it may vary in different objects. Different objects will be having different values in different situations. But it is not actually used for an identifier. So every object will be having some literals, that is actually the values associated with each of the attributes present in that particular object. So there are basically 3 categories of literals. So while looking into this portion, you will clearly understand what is actually a literal. So the first type is called as atomic literals. Atomic literals actually it is following the predefined or built-in type values. All the values that are added to the attribute which is of predefined or built-in type, or we can say based on the basic data type values. For example, some values will be short value, a small value, integer value. It can be a float value. It can be a boolean value. It can be a char value. So all these are basic data types. If any values, for example, roll number is an attribute which is having a value 5. So 5 is a value which is of short type. This 5 can be called as the current value of roll number, which is an atomic value. Similarly, for example, if you are having some percentage, CGPA is a field where we are having a value like 7.8 is a value CGPA. That is a float value. So 7.8 is a literal value which is having the data type float. Similarly, boolean will be having the values like true or false. Similarly, char is for representing the character values. Now the second types of literal is actually called as structured type literals. So first one is atomic type literals. Now the second one is structured type literals. So what do you mean by this structured type literals? It is not an atomic one, right? So a literal, a current value that are constructed by various other type constructors, like for example a date is a value that is created by taking the day, month and year, which is having a further structure available. It is not a single value which will be having some subdivision. That is why it is called as structured type literals. Similarly, we can use struct variables also. Struct variables, a particular situation. For example, a name can be a structured type by providing the first name, middle name and last name. So first name is of character type, middle name is of character type, last name is also of character type or string type. So these 3 values combine together to form a type. That is why it is called as structured literal. So sometimes the values will be a single atomic value. For some objects it will be atomic object which will be having some atomic value. which is of some basic data type like char, float or boolean or character. So that is atomic. Now structured means the same thing will be again being divided into a number of sub values. So substructure will be available with some additional data types that can be called as structured type of literals. And we are having a third category of literal which is called as collection literals, which always holds a group of values, a collection of values. For example, an array collection. An array collection actually consists of a number of elements of a particular type. A number of elements, group of elements together to form a collection, and this will be some type of value. Sometimes it will be character array, sometimes it will be a number array, depends on the values, or it can also be some set of objects. Some objects can be part of an array. A group of objects can be called as a collection. A group of values can be called as a collection. So group of any type can be called as a collection literals. So these are again the division of objects. So every object will be having some literals which holds the current value, what value we are assigning. It is just like we are declaring a variable in C like int a. Int a is a variable. So when we are assigning a value a is equal to 10, that 10 can be called as a literal. That is the value we are assigning to the variable a. Similarly, for an object, if an attribute is having a value, for example, roll number is having a value that can be of atomic type by using some basic data types. We can have a structured type when we are having multiple number of values present for a particular attribute in an object. It is called as a structured type. For example, date or a name with first name, middle name and last name. And a collection type, third collection category, where we are having a group of values, a collection of values together to form a single object or part of an object, which can be called as a collection literal. So every object will be having any of these three categories of literals present in that particular object. So we will see in detail, we will see some examples also. Now we will discuss about ODMG interface definition. As you know, interface is actually similar to a class. So before moving into the further examples of ODMG model, here the thing is we are discussing about storage of data in terms of object oriented database concepts. So as you know, this is almost similar to the concept of object oriented classes. So as you know, classes are actually having a number of elements, a number of attributes, a number of properties, some variables, some functions, and all these details are available within this class. So similarly in ODMG also we will be having a class like structure that is used to define the properties of a particular class, and based on this class we will be forming some object which holds all the properties of that particular class. So we are following the same object oriented database, object oriented programming language concept itself in this particular object oriented database also. So before moving into the definition of classes, we will see about interface. Interface is similar to a class. It is also similar to a class which consists of some number of datas and functions, datas and operations, or attributes and operations, which specifies only the behavior of an object type, and that cannot be used for creation of an object. So an interface is similar to a class which consists of some behavioral information, and this interface cannot be used for creation of an object. So many of the situation will be using interfaces for the creation of class. So later we can create a class based on this particular interface. In Java you might be knowing the interface name. We are having some properties, some common behavior is defined there, but we cannot create an object of that particular interface. We cannot instantiate that. We cannot create an object of an interface. But this interface can be utilized by some other class, and these classes can use for creating objects. So similarly, in object oriented database system also, we are having the provision for the definition of interface, where we can define some properties which can be utilized by some other classes. Okay, so this is the example where we are defining one basic thing, only one example interface is being defined. One example, that is interface date. So the name of the interface is date colon. This is the format of defining an interface. Interface date is the name of interface. Then after a colon, we are providing the type of that interface, which is following an object type. The interface is following an object type. Then within opening and closing curly bracket, we are specifying all the data description of that particular interface. So interface date is of type object. Object means it is further complex, further elements are available. So what are those elements? First one, we are defining an enumeration data, that is weekday. One user defined data type is created, that is weekday, for specifying the different weekdays. So we are going to create an interface for date. For representing a date, we are going to define an interface. So this is actually an interface which is already available within the object oriented database system. So we are simply showing that definition of date, which is already defined. So a weekday will define any of these days. So a date will be having any of these days. So just for defining, for creating that enumeration, this enumeration is similar to the enumeration in C. Among these set of days, any one day can be selected for a particular date. So it must be from these values only. So weekday, one enumeration data type is being defined, a semicolon. Then again we are having another enumeration data type month, which consists of all the 12 months, that is also defined. So for every date we require weekday, month. Then we are having three operations. One is unsigned short year. This is the type. Year is the name of operation. Then this parenthesis indicates that this is an operation or a function which is similar in C++. So year is used for returning the year. So this year function will return an year. Then unsigned short month will return the month. Then unsigned short day will be returning the date that is associated with the date interface. Similarly, in this date interface, we are having a number of data descriptions and operations are there. Then similarly, we are having one more operation, boolean is equal, just for comparing two dates. In date, other date. So date is the type, another date is taken as the parameter, and this is an int type parameter where it will receive an input. So from where it is being called, that input will be taken into this particular parameter. That is why it is given as in. If it is given as out, this value, that is from the function, this value will be taken out. It will be passed to some other location. So here it will be receiving the value from the calling function. So normally this is the syntax of an interface. It is almost similar to the interface structure in Java. So here you can see this is an enumeration type. Directly we are providing the value, just like initializing the value. This is also enumeration type where we are defining month with some set of initial values, but any one, it is enum, that is why we can select only one at a time. Then there is a function year will return, normally it will return a value. Then similarly month will return the month, then day will return the day. So all these are the function or operation declaration. So as you know, interface does not consist of a body. Normally in Java also, interface simply provides the function header or only the declaration of a function. It will not consist of any body because it is only providing an interface, or it will provide an abstract behavior to the following classes. The other classes can utilize this particular interface for the usage in that particular program. So all these are declarations only. We are not having any definitions. This year can be defined somewhere within some other class. This month can be defined. This day can be defined. So whenever any class utilize this interface, all of these must be implemented there. In Java, you might be remembering interface. If you are having an interface, that must be implemented by using implements keyword in a class. So class A implements A if A is an interface. Class B implements A. So that we can define these methods in that class. But we cannot define those here. We can only provide the data declaration and function declaration. Even this is equal is also a function. So similarly, several functions associated with date are already available within this interface. Date, which is already a predefined interface, which is already built in within the object-oriented database system. So this is only for describing the structure of an interface. Okay, so if you are familiar with Java, you can easily understand the concept of interface here. Now similarly, there are some built-in interfaces for collection objects available. There are some interfaces which is already available built-in for dealing with different collection objects. So what is collection objects? Collection objects are group of objects within a collection group, like what do you say, in an array, in a list, or in a set, a collection of values, a collection of objects. So in order to deal with these collection objects, we are using some built-in interfaces. So normally all the collection object will inherits the basic interface called as collection. So there is an interface called as collection available within the object-oriented database system, and the class must inherit. The class must inherit that collection interface in our program. Like what we are implementing an interface in our class in Java. Similarly, here our new class will inherit the collection interface. So we are using the same term inherits here, but in Java it is like implements. But implements also similar to inherit, because we are taking the property from an interface. But in this particular case, in object-oriented database, we are using the same term inherit for both between classes and between an interface and class also. We are using the same term, but there is differences between these two inheritance. Now while inheriting this collection interface, some of the operations that are present in that collection interfaces are just for, it will be almost like the previous structure. It will be having some data declaration and operation declaration. Some of the operations present in collection interface is given here. First one is cardinality. Cardinality defines the number of elements present in that particular collection set. Then isEmpty is used to check whether that collection group is empty or not. Then insert element is used for inserting an element into an existing collection group. Then remove element is used to remove a particular element from the collection. Then contains element for checking whether a particular element C is containing in that particular collection group. Then the last one is create iterator. Iterator is used for, I can create an iterator like I, just like a for loop I variable. Iterator is used for iteration between the different. So if I want to iterate between all the elements present in an collection group, that is I equal to the first value, then second value, third value, fourth value. If you want to iterate between the group of elements present in a collection object, we can use a create iterator. We can create an iterator, and based on the iterator we can have that iteration between all the elements present in the collection object. So these are some of the operations or functions which are declared within the collection interface, which can be used in some of the classes for the or by using inheritance, and we can implement any of these operations in our class. Now similarly, the different collection types What are the different collection types? You have already described about the collection literals. What are the different types of collection literals? So collection values we have already described, but now what are the different types? How we can create different collection types? Now, that means how we can create collection objects. Now these can be created by using different types, different collection types, like, so some of the collection types present in ODMG model are set, list, bag, array and dictionary. So what is a set? Set is similar to this mathematical set. We will be having some set of values that is separated by comma. Okay, so set means normally there won't be repetition of same value more than once. List means an ordered list. There will be some order for all the elements present in that collection group. There is a first value, second value, third value, fourth. There will be some ordering present in list. Then bag, it is similar to list, only thing is there is no order. A group of values are stored in a bag. Then array is like, there will be array means a set of values starting from index location 0. There will be a number of values present in an array. Now the difference with array is that there will be a boundary. We are setting a boundary for an array. For example, if you are setting boundary as 5, we can hold only 5 values for that particular array. We are not setting any boundary for set, list and bag, but for array we are setting a boundary. And finally we are having a collection object like dictionary, where we will be having a key value pair. For example, there is a key and there is a value K5, a group of key value pairs. That is why it is called as a dictionary type. If we require these type of informations in a group, we can have a dictionary type, which is also coming under collection types. Now each collection type may provide additional interface. So every collection type will be having its own corresponding interface that is already built in, and these interfaces will be having some of the operations similar to the previous case, like what we were discussing in general collection interface, and in the case of a date interface. Similar to that, individually for each collection type also we are having separate interfaces available, and some of the example operations present among in all these type interfaces are given below. That is create union, that is for creating the union of two different sets. Then create difference between two sets. Is subset of, just for checking if one set is subset of another. Then similarly is superset of, similarly is proper subset of. All these are related to set. So these are the operations that are present in the set interface, which is exclusively used for the collection type set. Similarly for list, we will be having similar type of operations available within that list interface. We will be having bag interface, we will be having array and dictionary interface. Corresponding operations are already declared or defined within the corresponding interfaces of those collection types. Now this is the object inheritance hierarchy. So what are the different elements? As you know, in Java also we are studying the object hierarchy. What is the root object? How we are having the different objects or interfaces that are present within the built-in system. So similarly in object ODMG model, the different hierarchy of built-in interfaces. So on top of all the interfaces we are having an object interface available. So from that object interface we are defining or we are inheriting a new interface called as collection. Similarly from object we are defining another interface called as date. Again from object we are creating another interface, timestamp, then time and interval. So on top of all the interfaces we are having a common interface called as object, which is a common one which consists of all the operations that are common for all of other objects. Now collection is inherited from object which again consists of some interfaces like set interfaces, list interfaces, bag interfaces, array interfaces, and dictionary interfaces. So collection interface, from collection interface we are inheriting some other interfaces that are of collection types that we were discussing before, like set. We are having set interface, and we have discussed about some of the operations present in set interface. Similarly, for other collection type also we are having the corresponding interface operations available. Now similarly, date is again, so you can now, we will just move into the previous example where that why we are using this object here. Now interface, the name of interface is date, which is actually inherited from object. So that is actually the meaning of this statement. We are defining a new interface, colon. Here we are not using implements, we are using colon for inheritance. So date is being inherited from object interface. So that is syntax here. Okay. So why we are using that mechanism? Because date is actually inherited from object, and we can define the operations. So date will be having different operations available. We are not having any further interface available based on date. Similarly, similar to date, we are having timestamp. Timestamp along with date will be having the time information also available. That object, it is also in, if you want to use some timestamp, we can use timestamp interface, that is again inherited from object. Then we can have time alone, that is also inherited from object interface. Similarly, interval between two time, for that we are using an interface. Time interval, for that we are using, so it is also inherited from the object interface. Now among these all these interfaces, we are having a separate interface called as iterator, which is applicable for all these collection objects. So iterator is a separate interface that is defined built-in, which is not based on object. A separate interface that will be having the properties for accessing the individual elements for iteration among all the elements present in any of these collection types. So we are having a separate iterator interface that is also built-in available within the object-oriented or ODMG model. I hope this architecture is clear. Now we will discuss about how to create an atomic object. So we are discussing about two types of objects. One is atomic objects and second one is complex objects. Atomic objects normally consist of atomic values only, single values. Then complex object means again the object will be having further substructure. That will be a complex type. So it can be called as a complex object. So atomic objects are user defined objects and are defined by the keyword called as class. So how we can create an atomic object? For example, a particular object, one particular object O1. How we can create an atomic object? A single object can be created. It can be compared with C++ or Java. How we can create one particular object? For that we need to have a class. We need to create the class with all the properties. Then based on the class we can create one particular object. So we will see one example how to create a class. This is the syntax. So specific syntax that is followed in ODMG model. So it is almost similar to C++, but there are some differences. So class employee. So this is the name of the class employee. Now normally in C++, just after class employee we are starting with this opening curly bracket, but here you can see something extra. Just listen to this. Within bracket I am using a keyword called as extend, not extend, EXTEND, not EXTEND, it is EXTENT, extend. So while defining a class, normally we are using an extend space, I am giving a name that is all underscore employees. A name is given for the class employee, that is all employees. So extend all employees. So all employees is a persistent name. We have already discussed about persistent objects in the previous video. Persistent object. A group will be assigned a single name. So this is the name given for all the employees. So this is a class used for creating the description of a particular employee, which is actually having an extent name, that is all employees. So all employees is like a location where first employee, second employee, third employee, fourth employee, fifth employee, it's all the employees are grouped into, or it will be under a single name, that is called as all employee. So an extent name is being given, or it can also be called as a persistent name is given for the entire employees. So whatever employees we are creating under this class employee, all the objects will be moving towards, or that will be under a single name, all employees. It is just like create employee 1, add into all employees, employee 2, add into all employees. So all the employees will be added into a single. So later, if you want to make all these employees persistent, we can refer to only all employees. We don't need to go to all individual employees for making it persistent. So if you make all employees persistent, all the employees present in this all employees under the extent name, all employees will also be persistent. That means these employees will be remaining there forever. So the usage of extent is used to provide a name which is actually a group name where the current class objects, all the objects can be coming under this extent name. That is called as extent all employees. So normally we are giving a group name here, all employees, or all students, all books. So just for representing a group, we are giving that type of name. Now again I am giving one more thing. Within the class we need to specify, as we are describing, we are creating a class, an object for database, right? It is for data representation. So normally for that, as in relational database, we should also have a key. So we are using a keyword key, and I am assigning SSN as the keyword for this particular not keyword, the key attribute for the class employee. So for all of these employees, is key attribute will be, key attribute means primary key, as in relational database system. Primary key attribute will be SSN. So from among the properties available within class employee, this SSN will be considered as the primary key. So just this one line, once again this one line, class employee within bracket extend all employees, a single name where all the employees created based on this class will be added. Then I am setting a primary key which is SSN. Normally for all the classes we are including these two. Then opening curly bracket, within this I will be declaring the first variable. Now for declaring each attribute we are using the keyword attribute. This is about ODMG model. So we will be having different object database models available, but now we are discussing about ODMG model only. So attribute space string name. It is like, it is a data type. This is the attribute name. Attribute is the keyword. String is also a keyword which is for representing the data type. Then name, semicolon. It is following these are similar to class. Attribute string SSN, attribute short age. So three properties are given for the class employee. Then as it is for object oriented database, we need to represent the relationship also. So in object oriented data management group model, we can represent relationship also, which is normally not available in our C++ or Java classes. Now how we can represent a relationship? We need to use a keyword relationship. Then so class employee relationship, so to which other object it is related, we need to represent that class name, that is department. Now what is the relationship? Relationship is works for. So relationship with whom? What relationship? That is the representation of relationship. So employee works for department. So this particular class employee or an object belongs to employee works for another class, maybe some other department. So we need to specify that relationship also while defining a class. So this is a very important portion, how to create an atomic object. For that we need to create a class. By using class only we can create objects. So how to create a class? The syntax of class, each and every terms are important here. Now we have defined all the attributes. We have defined one relationship. If you have more relationship, that can also be written here again and again. Then if you are having some operations like functions, void reassign. So void is the type, reassign is the name of operation. Then this is the parameter. Parameter is of int type. That means some parameter will be received, which will be received to the reassign parameter. And what type of value it is receiving? It is receiving a string value. That is why the type is given as string, and this is a name given for that string parameter. So some string name will be received here, and by using this, so it is used for reassigning the employee. So a string will be received, a new name, that is for reassigning with a different employee. If you want to reassign with a different employee, a new name must be added into reassign parameter. So this will be reassign. So normally this is all these are written inside the class, but in the object-oriented databases, these operations are defined outside by using any object-oriented object-oriented programming language. Maybe this reassign will be defined by using C++ or Java. So we need to mix that external object-oriented programming language along with the object data management group. So normally all the operations are defined outside the object-oriented database. That is by using any object-oriented programming language. So again, listen carefully the syntax of creating a class, the different features like extend, key, then attribute, then these built-in types, then relationship, then the representation of an operation in a class definition. Now what is this class extends? I have already explained that. Just again, once again I will just read this. It can have an extend defined in a class declaration. Each extend is given a name and will contain all persistent objects of that class. So that all employees, this all employees is the persistent name given under extend, and this all employees will contain all the employee objects which are persistent. For employee class, for example, the extend is called all employees. This is similar to creating an object of type. So all employees is similar to creating an object of type set of employees and making it persistent. So assume if you are trying to create a set by using set, if you are creating a set of employees, then that situation we need to make that persistent separately. Okay, but now if you are using this extend directly, we can provide the extend name while class declaration itself, but later we don't need to make it persistent. Automatically that extend name will be of persistent type, so that all the objects present under that extend name will also be persistent. Similarly, a class will be having a key which consists of basically one or more unique attributes. In our example, we had only SSN as the key attribute. Okay, so in employee we are having the SSN as the key attribute, which should have a unique value. That is like a primary key. Similar to primary key, we can have only a unique value for the key attribute. Now key can be composite also. We can have more than one attributes combined together to form a key. Primary key with more than one attribute. Similarly, here also it is possible. For example, a key space d number comma d name. These two together will form a key for that particular class. Now similarly, we are having a concept called as object factory is also present in object oriented data management group model. So an object factory is used to generate individual objects via its operation. An object factory is used to generate individual objects using its operation. That means in order to create separate objects, individual objects, separate objects, not that means a common objects and all can be created by using an object factory, which is a built-in interface that is already available. So the interface will be like interface object factory. So object factory is the name of an interface which is already available, and it consists of only single method, that is new, which is of type object. That means just for returning an object we are using new operation. So by using new we can create a new object by referring to the object factory interface which is already built in. The new returns the new objects with an object identifier. So if you want to create some simple objects, generally we can use the interface object factory and using the new operation. So now also we can create our own factory interface by inheriting this object factory interface. If we want to create our own object factory, we can create a new one by inheriting this object factory interface, and based on that we can create our own different objects. This is one additional feature of ODMG model. Now the difference or comparison between the interface and class definition. The interface and class definition present in ODMG model. Now ODMG supports two concepts for specifying object types. One is interface and second one is class. We have already described about interface and class. There are similarities and differences between interfaces and classes. Both have behaviors, both consist of operations, I have already mentioned, and it also consists of the attributes and different relationships. Now ODMG interface, it is a specification of the abstract behavior of an object type. As you know, as in C++ or Java, we have already discussed about interface. An interface is something that provides some abstract behavior. What the following classes must follow. Some instructions are given by the interface in C++, which is usually created by using abstract classes, which simply gives some idea what is to be done by the following classes. So it simply gives an abstract behavior of an object type, how the following classes must behave. So the classes can utilize this particular interface. Now the state properties of an interface, that is its attributes and relationships, cannot be inherited from. So we cannot inherit the properties of an interface. Its attributes and relationships cannot be further inherited. We can simply directly make use of that in our subclass. And objects cannot be instantiated from an interface. The objects cannot be instantiated from an interface. That also we have already discussed. Now we will look into ODMG class. So as I have already described, interface is simply for providing abstract behavior, but no instantiation. Only some restrictions are available with ODMG interface. But ODMG class actually consists of it is a specification of abstract behavior, and it also have the state of an object type. That means we can do instantiation. We can create object of a class. That is the specialty of class. It also supports extends inheritance to allow both state and behavior inheritance among classes. That means two classes can be extended. One class property can be taken into another class. That property is also being supported by extends. But multiple inheritance using extends is not allowed. What is multiple inheritance? This is one class, this is one class. from two classes we are creating a new class. This is called as multiple inheritance, but this is normally not possible with our normal extends inheritance. In Java also it is not being supported. Multiple inheritance is not being supported directly in Java also, but in ODMG model also, while creating a new class from already existing class, we cannot normally provide multiple inheritance. So these are some features related to ODMG classes. It actually used for creating the different states of different objects. It is used for creating objects. That means it can be instantiated. It supports inheritance using extends keyword. While doing extension, it is not possible to have multiple inheritance. So in this video we were discussing about ODMG model, which is a standard model that is used for the various object oriented database related activities, like the creation of interfaces, the creation of classes, then by using classes, the creation of objects, and also we have discussed about some of the built-in interfaces that are supported by ODMG model, which can be used by several classes, which can be helpful for several classes, and the various other examples of interfaces we have already seen. We have also seen the creation of class for creation of atomic objects or creation of different objects in ODMG model, the syntax of class and various properties of that class elements, like class name, then extend keyword, then key keyword, attribute, relationship, then the operation specification. All these were discussed in our this session. So this session we were dealing with all the creation of interfaces and classes. That is about the definition part. So generally we are discussing about all these portion. So in the next video we will be discussing about the different languages used with ODMG model, like ODL and OQL, through which how we can actually create these classes by using a particular syntax or a particular definition, object definition language, and how we can manipulate those data present in object oriented database by using object query language. So that's it for now. Thank you.